this is the only way. 5 lanes of traffic, an embankment, then a stream. It's like it's some kind of amphibianic fever dream. The total lack of law enforcement on this road's a crime. I'd write a letter, but I simply haven't got the time. Give me a call tomorrow if I haven't died, and I can tell you how I made it to the other side. Up, left, up, right, right, down, left, up, left, up, right. If I make it to the other side. Up, left, up, right, down, left, up, left, up, right. I hope I make it to the other side. Up, right, down, left, up, left, up, right. I gotta make it to the other side.
I had read an article that students remember things a lot longer if they're able to play a game. And the materials in religious studies are really pitiful when it comes to engaging the student in a meaningful way.
I think that, as Stacy said, putting them into that context in a way where they can't opt out is really powerful.
Greetings. My name is JD Ferrisrow. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Brebeuf Jesuit Preparatory School. And along with Stacy Hennessy and Beth Francosa, who you met in the earlier clip, we are excited to talk to you today about gamifying the theology curriculum. Now, games have been around in education for a long time. Long before Quizlet, there were Jeopardy-themed PowerPoint templates. And before any of that, many of us remember chasing Carmen Sandiego around the world, or worse, running out of food and dying of dysentery on the Oregon Trail. I swear, I think I had played through the game and died 20 times before I realized you could go hunting. But in the last few years, as the term gamification has been used in education, it's important to understand that there's a difference between playing games and gamifying learning. Gamification is the use of techniques developed in making some of the best video games, board games, and role-playing games throughout history. Techniques that have made geeks like me stay up all night trying to solve dungeons in Zelda, that have kept guilds and teams strategizing about a game they played the night before around the lunchroom table and after school. Today, we're going to explore some of these techniques and talk about how they can be used inside your classroom, particularly in the context of 2 role-playing games that we've introduced at both our freshman and our junior levels in our high school. Before we highlight the 2 games that we play in our religious studies curriculum, I want to go over some basic terms that come up again and again in our attempts to gamify our curriculum. These 3 concepts, goals, feedback, and self-correction, form the basis of almost all gamified learning. And while there are ways to make them more complex and more detailed, and hopefully you'll see examples of those today, they are at the most basic level the 3 elements that make gamified education fundamentally different than other types of learning that your students may have encountered. Let's start with goals. Now, goals can come in a variety of formats, from simply winning a game to an epic quest or a challenge or a crisis that must be solved. At the most basic level, gamification demands that students should be working toward accomplishing something that should be more than just grades. But as is the case with some simple game platforms like Quizlet or Jeopardy, sometimes that's just a matter of points or victory at the end of the class period, or the high regard of your peers. At the more complex levels, you are usually working with multiple students in teams or groups, sometimes competitively and sometimes collaboratively, to achieve nothing less than world peace.
This threat of failure definitely drove that whole sequence, because I think that we really, really just wanted to win that, and I don't think any of us were about to settle for losing it. So,
how the game goes about giving students the opportunity to accomplish this goal has a direct impact in how much the students will want to continue playing the game. When you have developed that perfect balance between the challenge that is before them and the skills that they have already acquired, gamers call that the flow, that perfect balance that makes you want to keep playing because you're challenging yourself just a little bit more than you did before. Even within the most complicated games that can take days or even weeks to complete, there are often a series of smaller goals. These incremental goals become motivating factors in pursuit of the larger quest. Think about it like Super Mario Brothers, where at the end of the first round, you found out your princess was in another castle. But because you had defeated that mini boss, you were interested in continuing the game for hours and hours and hours. The most complicated goals, the most complicated quests that we will see in gaming usually involves a theme or a storyline where students will be immersed in a setting, given very specific roles and characters to play, an overarching story within a universe that has very specific rules and very specific expectations. It is within these settings that some of the most complicated games can thrive, giving students not only a quest, but also the ability to make choices and to see what the results of those choices are. The second thing that I want you to pay attention to as we begin talking to our teachers about the games that they're playing inside their classrooms is feedback. Students, like gamers, crave feedback. They want to know how they are doing, what progress they are making. They want to know that they're on the right track. One of the advantages of games over education is where sometimes you will wait days or weeks to get a grade back on a paper. Video games give you immediate feedback. A board game immediately tells you whether an action you took was the right one or the wrong one. And that feedback creates this loop of expectation and action so that you can immediately revise.
That was one of the first things actually that I saw where, like, if I made a decision, the implications could be not only like immediate but pretty severe. I unfortunately I made the wrong decision in that specific scenario.
So what kinds of feedback are students looking for within a gamified environment? Some of these are simple. Nobody likes to lose. And so when a student keeps taking an action that creates a loss or that creates a bad environment, they're going to stop doing that. No one likes to lose things. Consequences, whether it is the deduction of points, a loss of items, more difficulty as you progress, can also be a motivating factor. Students want to make sure that they are in the best possible position to win the game. Likewise, you can do the reverse. You can award points, you can award items, you can give students special skills or special effects or special tokens that will allow them to progress farther in the game or make some aspect of the game easier later on. Badges are never a bad thing within a gamified environment because they are both an external source of pride for the students, but also an indication of the amount of effort and investment that a student has made within the game. This can include things like status or advancement through levels or progress and skills. Ultimately, though, what you're looking for is some mechanism within the game itself that lets students know that the actions that they took are being rewarded or that the actions that they took are going to make the game harder to complete in the long run. Thus, we see that the feedback that the students are receiving has a direct impact on how easy or hard it is for the students to accomplish the goal. This leads to our third aspect of gamified learning, self-correction and motivated adaptation. Students, upon receiving this feedback, will immediately begin to alter and modify their behaviors in order to achieve the goal, in order to win the quest. And in doing this, they become very motivated to adapt their behavior to whatever the rules of the playing field are. That means that if the game is correctly set up, students will immediately receive course corrections through the game itself without relying on the intervention of a teacher. The game becomes the teacher, and the students' self-correction leads them toward accomplishing the goal.
And it was also a struggle because the teachers really stayed out of it. It was 100% student-led. You could never ask either of our teachers for help. They didn't care. It was all on us to figure it out for ourselves.
So Goals, feedback, and self-correction are the three things that we believe are at the core of gamified learning. Now let's talk about some specific games and how they've been used in our classrooms.
What was really, really important to me is the culture of first century Palestine at the time that Jesus drops into the story of salvation history. That the tension from the Roman government and the tension from the temple hierarchy are so critical to understanding why Jesus was such a breath of fresh air. But he was religiously observant, he was respectful to the Romans, but he plowed a way through of religious observance and a radical overturn of the values of the day. And so what I wanted for the students was to experience the oppressive presence of both Rome and the temple hierarchy in their own life experience by stepping outside their daily reality and inhabiting these characters. So the idea is that no one has any control, because you would not have had a lot of control in first century Palestine. So we use the gym, and in the middle of the gym is the market square. So the temple square, off the temple square is the bakery, the fishery. What else is there? And then around the perimeter are the households. So there's a ghetto for the outcasts, lepers, widows, orphans, the blind people. There is a housing district, which is just tape on the gym floor. And the names of the household are on the gym walls, telling you who is the husband, who's the wife, who are the children. And then there's a nicer neighborhood where the Sadducees, Pharisees, and their families live, but they're quite apart from the lesser class. When you walk into your household, you have roles. So each student has a piece of paper that tells you who you are, how old are you, and what your job is during the role play. The days, we play for 3 days. A day is 10 minutes long on day 1 and day 2. Day 3 is 7 minutes long. By day 3, they get it. They know the rules of the game. They know the shortcuts. Mm-hmm. So we really make it much more intense. During the course of the day, every family has to go to get some money and then spend that money on their daily bread. They have to pay taxes to the Roman government on day 1 and day 3. And they have to make a temple tax to the chief priest on day 2, which is an animal sacrifice, which they have to buy at the market. And that requires you getting money. Mm-hmm. The fishermen, there's quite a few fishermen in the game, and you get fish by rolling a die at the fishery. And you get the face value of the die, and that can translate into money. So they have tokens, there's physical tokens in the game. The wives have certain responsibilities, there's social rules, there's a matchmaker in the game. You can only marry off your daughter with a dowry. Dowries are not easy to come by, and they have to be signed off by me. Because they're too nice to each other. So,
yes, that's true.
Right? I'll walk away. We also have 2 Roman guards with sticks. The sticks are rolled up pieces of paper with tape around them, and their job is to keep the streets cleared, especially for the wealthy vineyard owner, for the Sadducees, etc., and to keep the blind people and the lepers off the streets. And then the random character is John the Baptist, who super kind, doesn't have a house, doesn't have any job in the role play, doesn't have to make money, doesn't have to buy food, and doesn't get a ton of followers on day 1. On day 2, you see him walking around with 2 or 3 people.
Right.
On day 3, the John the Baptist crowd gets significantly larger because you see the students despairing.
You could do the sticks. I was a Roman guard one time when we didn't have enough student, and the stick really gives you a feeling of like, oh well, here I am, and you can kind of you kind of wield it and say, get out of here, And I think one of the important things about the game, and I think Stacy has kind of alluded to this, is that it's not the kind of game you would design to play for fun. Like, it's not a fair game. Right. Like, that's the point of the game. right, is that it's not a fair game.
Right.
So some of the principles I think are a little different
Mhm.
than if you were in another kind of competitive or collaborative game because of the learning objective.
Right. Well, I truly wanted them to suffer. I wasn't looking for
Truly,
compassion. I wasn't looking for empathy. I want them to know what it's like to be a 12-year-old girl whose father is arranging your marriage. And you're not allowed to leave the home without your mother or another adult companion. I wanted the lepers to experience the isolation of walking through town with a bell on. I wanted the chief priest to have the type of control where the chief priest can collect taxes and prepare young men for their bar mitzvah and have these mitzvot happening in the temple square, and to feel that the arrogance and the power that came with that. And the longer I have done it, the more I realize students quickly drop in and take on these roles, much to the shock and dismay of their classmates. And then I can use that experience. I can go back to that day for the rest of the semester for 12 more weeks, and they immediately know what that felt like.
I remember Emily, another really bright student, coming up to me and saying, you know, we realized we just don't have the money to marry off all of our daughters. We don't know what to do. Do you think we should join John the Baptist?
Yes.
And I said, well, gosh, that would be, maybe, right?
Yes.
Jesus is not in the role play, but John the Baptist is there kind of going around trying to gain followers. And I don't think any of those students forgot why they would want to join someone countercultural like that. What would push them to that?
Their teacher.
Right.
So over the years, how has the game changed in terms of the way the game is played based on things that you wanted to see as outcomes? Because I assume you're changing the game and the rules of the game because you want certain outcomes to happen.
Right.
So you get to control the rules.
Right. At the beginning of the game, it was too easy. Everybody was having a great time, or they weren't. It was too binary. So I consulted with you, JD, and we decided there has to be more reward and failure in the game. So I added poker chips. And the poker chips have different value, and they're exchangeable. So I was advised you have to have more exchanges in the game. So now the exchanges are poker chips, cards with animals and fish on them that get exchanged for currency or something. We added the marriage contracts. So a physical contract. We added a daily checklist, like you have to have accomplished these 8 things, and then a teacher goes around at the end of the day and checks the checklist and said, your taxes are going to double tomorrow because you never paid your taxes.
And I think if you can have like clear directions, clear, tokens or something to pass, that will help you, and that'll help the students be a little more self-directed if you can have the checklist for them and the description for them. I found it helpful to spend a little time before just kind of going over what some of the roles would be, in class before. And then, hopefully they're not coming to you all the time for their questions. Hopefully you can just, approve the contracts or, or check off the checklists. But hopefully they'll go to each other. They'll start looking for some solutions from each other.
I would also add that there's an element of not knowing.
Yeah.
So not to give this, teachers are so used to telling the students what they expect of them, but the role play only works with a certain amount of not knowing, and the students have to problem solve. They have to do some critical thinking on the spot. So I set up the culture of first century Palestine, the tension of the culture, and then let them figure it out based on their role sheet, whatever they're reading that morning.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things about using gamification in the classroom is that we as the teacher don't have the answer.
Right.
We set it up, the students look to each other, they get creative, they fail and try again, but it's not like, oh, hey, Miss Franzosa, Miss Hennessy, did I solve it?
Did I win?
Did I win? Right. It's not about that.
No. So John Hunter is a master teacher. He taught elementary school and a school for gifted children, and he designed it for his social studies unit, the World Peace Game, which is a role play for fourth graders where they receive portfolios as national leaders of 4 fake countries. And the game is literally a physical structure that's 4 by 4 and 4 planes that are, I don't even know how tall, but at least 6 to 8, 7 feet tall, about that. So you can look it up online. You can look up John Hunter. He did a TED Talk in 2014. He wrote a book, World Peace and Other Fourth Grade Achievements. There is a film on Netflix that's 56 minutes long called World Peace and Other Fourth Grade Achievements. And there's a training program. So I found out about John Hunter. I applied for a professional advancement grant. I got it, went to the training, and was amazed.
The dozens of crises each have, 1 or several paragraphs about them. The packet is intense, and the first couple days when we read through, Stacy will kind of intentionally read through and then kind of go, any questions? Okay, number 28, and like intentionally kind of just rush, right?
Yeah.
The day looks like each of the 4 countries and then the agencies giving a report.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Prime Minister Nave, and we just recently signed off on this treaty with Franzosa trade agreement that granted them 6 game days of fishing, and we will pay 50% of all the natural disaster assistance, like move the resources out of the area with the volcano.
Excellent.
And then the students have time for negotiations. They'll ask for it. They'll say, may we have some time for negotiations, and Stacy will offer a couple of minutes, and then they just run. Then they just go. And they say, okay, we need to talk.
So my title was the Prime Minister, and I led the country of Franzosa. So my purpose in the game was leading my country and overseeing the other members of my cabinet. And our goal was to try to raise the country of Franzosa from a very, very minimal budget to a place of prosperity and peace with other nations.
So what if we ask to take this if we give them the water to save their country?
Then you're walking you explain the levels, and then you have to explain all 46 crises. Mm-hmm. And then at first there's this huge level of excitement and come on, let's play. And then after the end of the crises, there's this level of despair and confusion and chaos, and that lasts 3-4 classes. It lasts a while.
Yeah.
And then the cabinets start not getting along. Like, no, I was going to do that. No, you do that. No, that's a terrible solution.
Yeah, the most pressing for me was the issue. There was a Nin artifact. I forget where it was. I think it was technically it was in some other country, but it was on a coral reef, and it was worth like $450 billion or something. So there was a ton of money involved. But in order to mine it off of that coral reef, it would cause damage to the reef that would result in the extinction of a species.
The way through. So one day a country came and asked him for a huge loan, like $30 million or something. And he has $1 trillion in the bank. Right. And so he says, no. He says, oh, okay, that's what the World Bank is for. To give loans to underdeveloped countries. Sure, you can have $30 million. She leans over and she grabs the checkbook and she says, we don't just give away money.
Like, if we could get money from you now, depending on how much you're willing to give us.
So you want $79 billion from us?
No. I mean, that would be ideal.
Present this. This seems overwhelming. Like it's a multi-week project with not a whole lot of teacher able to take comfort in the fact that you are the expert in the room and know exactly how things are going to play out and how things are going to happen. The students have varying levels of power and ability and stress levels and 46 crises to solve.
Right.
I guess my first question is, why is this worth it?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So I had a student that reached out to me over the summer and asked me to write her college rec. And she said, Miss Hennessy, I can't begin to tell you what an impact the World Peace Game had on my life. I've changed.
I think, well, playing this game has really pushed me towards a potential major that I want to try. So originally I was thinking about going into elementary education. And then after kind of participating in this game, I decided that I really want to go into public policy, especially surrounding education. But I don't want to like just change like individual kids' lives. I want to change like the face of education. And so this game really helped me kind of like push me towards that goal.
I think the biggest thing that I took away from the World Peace Game was kind of that element of collaboration, which is a little like, especially during the shutdown, it was kind of hard to collaborate with other people initially, but it also just made me realize even more the importance of it. And in the real world, whatever you choose to pursue in your life, you're going to have to work with other people, so you're going to have to figure out how to do it. And it's different from just being in like a group project or whatever. Like in this game, you had to solve problems.
It's building those skills for the students, that ability to work together, to negotiate, to speak. All of that stuff is so valuable.
It's absolutely a production, you know, like it costs money, it costs time, but there's really no other experience that I have had in any of my schooling that has been as interactive and I think as fulfilling as this one, because you're being put into these scenarios.
Yes, it is 100% worth it. I think back on my past 4 years as a high school student, this is the best way that I've learned. It's interactive.
The interaction that you get, I think, is what actually builds that understanding, and I think that that's really what education should be about, because I feel like there's not really enough of this hands-on type of learning.
I think that there's one where the really oil-rich desert country has the oil gusher, and in order to cap it, like it takes money, but it also takes a coin flip. So that's the one with the coin flip. Yeah. So they have to have this plan, but then they also have to get a best 2 out of 3 flip. It doesn't always work.
And we got to the very last round and they failed the coin toss again. Like they didn't get it a single time. So it was like, oh no, this is so bad. So right away, we had a ton of money left over from that artifact. So right away, I raised my hand and I was like, I want to petition the weather goddess to allow me to pay $1 billion to try again on this coin toss myself.
So it's still gushing oil. So it's significant environmental loss.
So it's Helios's issue.
Yes, it's Helios's issue.
Okay. I would like to hand over some more time to Via.
Prime Minister Fitzgerald, and I would like to petition the weather goddess to have us pay $1 billion in order for a chance to cap that oil well.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I'm Prime Minister Schumacher from the
Whoa, hey, you
Please
gave
be
me time.
seated. Ms. Doring, you have the floor.
I would like to yield my time to Franzo.
Prime Minister Francis, and we would also like to petition the weather goddess to pay $1 billion in order to try to flip for the cap the oil. No one like
It is tails. Considering the fact that all countries are above budget and all crises have been solved, I hereby declare that you guys have won the World Peace Game.
To the other side, I'll break